Hi everyone, welcome back to Steve's Garage. Today I'm replacing the outer tie rod ends on a 2nd gen Ford Escape. This should be the same for Mercury Mariners and Mazda Tributes of the same generation, but please double check the sizes and make sure it's all the same. In the case of these specific tie rods, they're not showing any signs of failure yet, but I was here replacing the control arm, noticed that the boots were pretty cracked, and I figured I might as well replace them while I'm in here and I've got the car up and off the ground. If you have any questions about diagnosing a worn outer tie rod, please check out my other video here. Let's quickly cover the tools you'll need to get this done. 19mm socket, 18mm socket, 15/16 wrench, 15mm wrench, 7mm wrench, pliers. A pickle fork is optional, but it helps. I'm using Moog greasable end links, but feel free to use whatever you want. Sledgehammer. I will be using my impact gun today, though a ratchet will definitely work fine, especially if you're not in an area where everything's rusted. Lastly, I forgot to picture a torque wrench, but you'll need one of those as well. The stop nut is 15/16, and if you have to mess with the inner tie rod, the flat spot on it is made for a 15mm wrench. I like to break the outer tie rod loose from the inner tie rod while it's still connected. In this case, the stop nut or jam nut is actually seized to the inner tie rod, so I can just grab a hold of that and spin it independently of the outer tie rod. If that's not the case, you can use the smaller wrench on the inner tie rod and use that to spin it from the outer tie rod. Next, remove the 18mm nut that holds the outer tie rod to the knuckle. If you're not using an impact gun and things are a little corroded, you'll probably need heat or penetrating oil to help you out. Typically, you can give the knuckle a good whack and the tie rod will just pop right out. In this case, that didn't work, and you can try hitting the bottom of the tie rod, but I don't really like to do that. In this case, we are replacing the tie rod, so it's okay, but if you weren't planning on replacing the tie rod and you just have to disconnect it, it's not good to hit the bottom of it. That's when the pickle fork comes in. That's a great tool. It just slides right in there. You can give it a whack with the hammer, and the tie rod pops right out. From here, you should just be able to hold onto the inner tie rod and unscrew the outer tie rod. In my case, I over-tightened that stop nut a little too much when I loosened it earlier, and so I had to play around with that again. The reason I'm not trying to move the stop nut too much is because that tells me where the tie rod was, and even though I'll need an alignment after this, I'm trying to get it as close as to the way it was when I took it off. For me, getting it as close as possible is just peace of mind. If I can't get an alignment right away, or if I have to drive the car sooner than I thought, I can at least make it down the road. Another method is you can just loosen the stop nut and then count how many turns the tie rod took to get off. The new end links I picked up are Moog, as I stated earlier. They are greasable end links, but these actually came greased, so you don't have to grease them today during installation. You can go ahead and thread them on until they hit the stop nut and then install it back into the knuckle. These do use a castle nut and cotter pin versus the OEMs that don't. I've never had a problem with these aftermarket units that do this. If you've had a different experience, please feel free to leave a comment. In the case of these replacement Moogs, the nut is 18mm, so that's awesome, same size as the OEM, and then it gets torqued to 59 foot-pounds. My apologies for this terrible camera angle of installing the cotter pin, but I'm guessing if you're doing outer tie rods, you probably know how to install a cotter pin. Either way, it goes through the hole in the threaded shaft of the outer tie rod. If you don't see the hole, just tighten that castle nut a little bit. You'll see it, slide the cotter pin through there, bend the tabs back, and you're good to go. Now I'm just installing the Zerk fitting since these are greasable units. Again, if yours are not, you can skip this step. Lastly, you want to tighten up that stop nut against the new tie rod, make sure that's good and tight. You also want to schedule yourself an alignment because it's highly unlikely that you got it good enough to not need one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.